All right, and it looks like we are live doing another Mentor Minutes episode. Thrilled to have you on board here. This is just a chance for leaders from around the world to come together and ask questions. And these are just regular, everyday frustrations that leaders go through. I'll try to apply some of the principles and the theory behind leadership and give you some actionable steps to be able to get over your leadership hurdles. Hamza, so good to see you jump right on this particular live feed. I did also want to give a shout out to my YouTube channel. If you haven't checked out my YouTube channel, it's a great place to look at a ton of videos. I have hundreds of videos on there. So you can check it out, youtube.com/Cameron Morsi. Really creative title on that one. So check out the YouTube channel and take a look at those videos. There's something in there that's going to help you. I am sure of it. So as we have some people jump on here, Samar, John, so good to see you both join today. As we have some people jump on, if you have any questions, drop down into the comment section. I'm happy to field those. I'll do them on a live basis. But in the meantime, I do have some that I received offline. So if you want to keep yourself anonymous, this is a great way to do it. Just private message me, or you can email me, cm@cameronmorsi.com. I'll keep your name out of it, kind of blur some of the details. So if you have some of your employees or your boss watching with you, you can go ahead and keep that anonymity. Not a problem. But drop down in the comments any frustrations, anything going on. It's the middle of the week now. So anything you've been putting off that you haven't been looking forward to getting to, this is a great chance to get some direction on that, hopefully. First question comes in. It's how to become a good mentor. What steps should I take on an initial basis? Love it. We're on Mentor Minutes asking about how to be a mentor. And that's fantastic. And I really do wish that all of you would look to pass this knowledge on to those that are around you, whether it's peers, whether it's subordinates. This knowledge isn't something, it gets more power the more that you share it. And so it's not something that's like a secret that you hold on to. It actually gets more power for you when you pass it along. Two things when you talk mentoring. The main thing is asking questions. What's going on? What are the struggles? Okay. But I will focus on two things, and this goes for all of my coaching clients. I have them isolate two things. What are three main frustrations they have on the job right now? And what are three goals that they have for their job, for their career, whatever it happens to be? So the two subjects to really work on, if you want to work on your mentoring of your subordinates, your peers, if you're looking for some direction, if you have a mentor in the organization, you want your boss to be your mentor, two things. What are the frustrations that you're dealing with? Because those are the things that hold you back from getting at the second thing, which is your goals. So really isolate on those two things. That's exactly what I go through in my private coaching sessions, and it's exactly what I recommend for any mentor that's out there. Next question comes in. How should you handle if you work with other leaders that are very negative about the organization? When you run across somebody, and this, you can have employees that are negative, you can have peers that are negative, you can have your boss that happens to be negative, and this is something that everybody deals with on a regular basis. You can take the sunshine approach, which is talking about all of the positives, and when they bring up a negative, you bring up a positive. I don't actually find that to be nearly as effective in turning that sort of behavior around. The main thing that I point to is asking them the question, okay, well, what should we do about it? There is almost always, in any of the issues that are brought up, there's almost always some action that people can take. And a lot of times, griping and complaining is almost some sort of strange political move where it's, hey, you know what, I recognize that there's a problem, but I'm not going to do anything about it. But I at least got to the recognition point. Oh yeah, we were aware of that. I've been talking about that for weeks. Well, what did you do about it? Should be the question that somebody asks. But when you get hit with the negative, it's okay, well, I get it. I feel the same way. What do you think we should do about it? What's one small thing that we can do to maybe start turning the tide on this? And that does a few things. It gives a little pushback. All right, to that behavior, because all of a sudden it's not that I'm getting the positive feedback of you piling on and we go round and around about how negative things are. That when you acknowledge that and feed that with more negativity, it just spirals around and around and around, and people keep talking about it and it gets worse and worse and worse. So you stop that from taking place. You also get the person thinking about not problems, but thinking about solutions, hopefully. Rowena, so good to see you here. So you want them focused on solutions, not problems. There are solutions to everything. There's almost always something that you can do, even if it's something small. So get them thinking about that. The third thing, and hopefully this is what happens when you ask somebody who's really negative what it is they think we should do about it. Don't make it them. What do you think you can do about it? What do you think we should do about it? Make it inclusive. But when you get them taking an action, when you start taking action on something, one of the worst things that we do when we get in a funk, and this happens just personally as well, is we wallow. We just sit there and we think about how bad things are. But what happens is if you take a small action, any action, towards your goal or towards getting yourself out of that particular funk, it has an crazy exponential increase on how you feel about that particular issue, how you feel about what is going on. So focus on getting into action. Take that little action and you start leaving some of that bad stuff behind. That's how to tackle negativity. Bridget, Neil, so good to have you on board here. And I do have some more questions that I received offline, but if you do have any questions, you can always drop down in the comment section. I will get to those right away. I can get to these ones that I received offline anytime. So any questions, I'll answer them in real time. If you have any frustrations in the workplace, peers, subordinates, your boss, all of those things are fair game for me here. Next question comes in. 2 departments have integrated but continue to have 2 managers. Been with the company for 20 years. How do you deal with negative management? Well, I kind of talked about how to deal with negative management in the last question. I would like to address the 2 managers. I did have a time in my career where I was a co-manager of a department. And it wasn't something I was looking forward to, but it actually worked out really well because myself and her had different skill sets, different tendencies. So I could work the analytical angle on things. She could work the procedural angle on things. I was more of a rah-rah cheerleader. She was more of the by the book sort of thing. So acknowledging those strengths and weaknesses that you and a co-manager have can help you, I want to say, divvy up the duties. It's not that you completely delegate one duty. It's important that you both have a stake in everything that's going on, but it may be that it's a 75-25 split. And what can happen is if you manage this correctly, you actually get better. Both of you get better. It's that 1 + 1 = 3 sort of thing. So when you have co-managers, talk through things. Communication is key. So co-locate your desks if at all possible. Don't be in a situation where you split things up across the sales floor or something like that. Co-locate your desk so that you are on the same page, you are giving the same message, and you can work off of one another and maximize your strengths and minimize your weaknesses. So if you're in a co-manager position, that's what you want to do. If you are one of 10 supervisors in a big department, make sure you're working on communication. Make sure you're finding ways of leveraging people's strengths and weaknesses. Do you even know what your other fellow supervisors' strengths and weaknesses are? Have that discussion. And maybe this is something you bring in your boss into and say, hey, I think this is, we have an opportunity to work on our strengths and weaknesses in this if you give us the flexibility and if you give us the opportunity to talk amongst ourselves to work on this. Roma, good to see you on here. And Luke, just completed Dale Carnegie course on leadership. Learned a great deal. Luke, I have noticed that you've been gone from these sessions. Good to have you back here. And I am thrilled that you took the Dale Carnegie course. One of those things I know I've got Decisive by Chip and Dan Heath this Friday, but one of the books that I'm going to be revisiting on my Friday book discussions is going to be the Dale Carnegie How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's important when you read really great books, and that's one of those foundational ones. It's important that you revisit those. So, you read the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People 10 years ago, but how much in your life has changed in the last 10 years? There's an extraordinary amount of difference. But the principles that you learn in Dale Carnegie, and I'm not surprised you learned a great deal, they are really foundational principles for communication, for leadership, for your life. And it's something that I always recommend for people is to invest in themselves in that way. And I'm thrilled that you did, Luke. Laura has the next question for us, and it's how do you deal with an employee that takes everything personally and cannot understand that some decisions are based on the business? Laura, it's really difficult in those cases, as you well know. The important thing is to really double down on the why. And what I want you to do is I want you to double down on the why, the reason for the decision, the reason this takes place. Give them figures. If there's numbers, present them with the numbers on things. The thing is everybody is like this. When we talk communication, when we talk accountability, when we talk delegation, the question to ask is the WIFM. What's in it for me? You need to answer that for every employee. So this is not something that is completely abnormal. This person just might display it differently. So double down on that why. All right. The other thing is to bring them in, ask them questions. What don't you understand about this? All right. So bring them in and have a discussion with them. The third thing is to let it go. All right. If you've doubled down on the why, if you've had the questions, if you've asked them the questions, brought in the dialogue so that they understand the issue, then you know what? Let their personality traits of taking things personally just be. Part of this is because it's a defensive mechanism on their part. The other part of it is they understand. All right, logically they understand, and they'll take away from the discussion, and they will understand logically, but they still have an emotional response to things. This happens a lot when we talk about transparency in the workplace. It's, if you have a downsizing, being completely upfront with everybody. They understand these things. They don't like them, but they do understand them. So, third step is move on from that. I know that's very kind of brief and hard-hitting kind of advice on that, and I wish I had some sort of magic pill for that, but really doubling down on the why, getting the dialogue, that hopefully brings them around, and if that doesn't, then you really just have to move on. Realize that they will process that. They'll get past the emotional aspect of things and get to the logical side of things. Pauline has our next one. I wonder how many employers actually look at this in personality types, MBTI. Very, very few, Pauline. That's actually really good. Somebody out there could probably open up another window and Google how many employers do any sort of personality types. I've found in my place, I personally prefer the DISC profile assessment just because it's a little bit simpler than the Myers-Briggs to put in place, and you get most of the same benefits out of it. But it is extraordinarily enlightening. If you haven't taken with your team, with your work members, if you haven't taken a personality assessment, you really should, because the dialogue that takes place after everybody takes that and you start seeing how it applies is absolutely hilarious, because everybody all of a sudden has light bulbs going off all over the place. Like, that's why I don't communicate with that person. That's why they always irritate me. That's why I get along with this person. That's why that person is always the social butterfly. It is really interesting. So for those of you out there, if you lead a team, it's a really pretty minor investment, say in a DISC profile assessment. You can conduct it yourself, very simple, but that would be something that I would recommend, Pauline. But very, very few. To answer your question, very few do any sort of personality assessment, either in the hiring process, which is a great thing to do, by the way, or once they have people in place. It goes along with so much of this leadership development stuff. It just isn't something that is invested. It's taken as a given in so many organizations. So again, any questions, drop down in the comments. I'm caught up on those, so I've got some that I need to get to that I received offline. When you manage team leads and being in good terms, in particular with one lead, how likely is it that frontline agents who are reporting to that same lead will share their honest feedback about the team lead in skip level meetings? How to manage perception of your agents. Personally, for perception is something that you almost always have to manage. I'd almost be more concerned about a perception of a lead that you get along with really well that you don't acknowledge. At least you've acknowledged that this could be an issue. There's lots of hidden issues that you aren't aware of from a perception basis. So it's good to ask those questions. What I would tend to do in these cases when you have those skip level meetings and you're worried that they're not going to give you the honest feedback because they know that this lead is a friend of yours, for instance, what you need to do is you need to seed the discussion. So it may be that you open it up with, what are areas of improvement? What are things that you would like to see this lead do more of? What are the things that you'd like to see this lead do less of? And what you do is you actually seed that discussion. So after they say, no, I can't really think of anything. Well, something that's been brought up before is this. And so you bring up an issue, and you probably have 1, 2, or 3 of these things in your back pocket. So it'll round out those particular issues, but what you're looking for is the question, and what else? And so you ask them what else, and you see if you get anything more. So you see that discussion that lets them know that you're acknowledging that there's areas for this person to work on. You do not get into the, yes, and we're working on this and this and this. Don't get into how you're addressing those things. Just get clarity on the issues surrounding that. So if you have a lead, a supervisor, a manager that you get along really well with, make sure that you have those things ready that you can seed those discussions with, and hopefully that'll open up some of the feedback. They'll realize at least at that point that you're open to that feedback, and that could be really helpful. Pauline's doubling down here for a friend. A team leader just got promoted to manager with a divestment. She's drowning in her new job and lets her old team down. There's no new team leader. Tasks are being dumped on this team that have nothing to do with this team. How should an employee survive this particular period? And Yamagishi, good to see you over here on Twitter and Periscope. I'm thinking really hard how to manage the leader. Part of it is an employee is trying to, I would go into manager and ask why your team is being given these tasks when you can understand why it will help. Suggest another team helps if possible. And that's great, Luke. Love that. Love that. You took it to a slightly different direction than I was going to go. I was actually going to jump right past the why, which was probably a mistake, and start offering suggestions to this manager of people, how to delegate these particular tasks. And it may be that it delegates to another it delegates to another individual or another team on there, but to really try to step in. When the manager's drowning, the issue is when you're an employee and you see that your supervisor or your manager is drowning, the question is how can I help? Not how can I survive? How can I help? Because that's going to make it better all the way around for yourself and for everybody else. When the manager is drowning, they can't see what's going on. So there's obvious solutions oftentimes in place that they just can't get to. And it may be, as Luke says, suggesting that another team helps, asking why it is that they're getting these things dumped. They may not have asked the question, why am I getting this dumped on me? This is actually some other department's issue. So go ask the manager what you can help with, but also offer suggestions. And it's not, and do it in a way that is not, usurping authority or anything like that, but maybe just little things. Asking the why is great, Luke. I appreciate that. But also just making those suggestions that you see that it might be a little bit obvious. Next question I have is, I want to grow within the organization that I work for, but what can I do when leadership management does not teach best practices and share best principles? They keep certain knowledge to themselves and expect you to learn on your own. Well, I'd take the challenge, quite frankly, as far as learning on your own. You can probably talk to peers and talk to other departments about what works best. What doesn't work right now? What are the best practices? Put together your own list of best practices. This is where you step in. It might not even be that your executive leadership is malicious in this. It may be that they're just distracted with other things. And it's poor leadership, but that may be just what it is. But you can step in and talk to your peers, talk to the other departments, and find out what it is exactly that they do that is a best practice, and take charge of your own learning. You don't need to get spoon-fed by executive leadership. You're talking about learning. This isn't something that's bad or frowned upon or anything. Take the extra step. Have lunch with somebody from another department. Have lunch with one of your peers and pick their brain on how they do their job and how they do it really well. So that's how I'd kind of tackle that situation. Take learning upon yourself, whether it is tuning into these sessions. You get a ton of information from other people and from myself on how to be a little bit better leader, and picking up just a few things can really help out. Just one thing every day. I'll give a shout out to my single step leadership program that's going out every Monday. One simple thing that you can put in place every single week, week after week after week. Those things are going to stack on top of one another and start building like compound interest on things. Cindy, so good to see you here as always. Oh, yes, there we go. Abida has the next question for us, and that is, what would be the ideal way to deal with stubborn subordinates? Hit them with hard and fast, black and white information is how I describe it. So hit them with numbers, hit them with reports, hit them with stack rankings. So what I mean by stack rankings is a lot of times you'll have a stubborn subordinate that isn't performing up to snuff. The reason is they think they're great, even though they're not. And so you give them their numbers. on, yeah, hey, these are what your sales. Well, yeah, my sales are increasing. But what they don't see is that they are in the bottom third of all of the sales agents. So maybe take names off of the list, but show them where they rank for the month as far as where they're at. Hit them with some black and white numbers as much as possible. The other thing in regards to being stubborn is oftentimes not understanding why things are being done, the reason for those decisions, why they are important. That's where a lot of it comes in. People just don't understand. And I get it. You have probably already communicated the reason for things to be done, the reason why things need to happen, but you need to reiterate it over and over again. You need to use different channels. I use the example all the time of my experience back in running a call center, 350 agents, a ton of calls coming in. We would have stand-up meetings at the beginning. We would post the minutes from those stand-up meetings or the agenda from those stand-up meetings on the bulletin board. We would include it on the knowledge base portal that people would use to look up information. We would put it on flat screen TVs that are all up around the contact center. And you would be surprised, even after all of that, how many employees, when I walk up to them and go, hey, how's it going with this? They go, huh? I didn't hear about that. Well, it's there. It's all over the place. So you need to avail yourself when you're explaining the why and the reason behind things. You need to avail yourself of multiple avenues, and that's how you're going to get through to them. A lot of times the stubbornness, by the way, gets into the issue of perseverance. There isn't a quick, switch that gets flipped on this particular issue. It's something that builds over time. One of the big things about including the reasoning and the why behind your actions is that it is something that is going to build trust over time. So they might not really get it, but just putting in something the one time, but it creates a little bit of a seed, and that seed builds and grows over time as you keep watering it with more reasons. And you don't have to get into long-winded explanations of why you told them to do something or why this aspect is important. It just takes a sentence fragment. Because blank. I need you to answer the phone this way because blank. It's just very simple. And as you do that over time, you start building some trust, and you'll get less stubborn, less resistance, and you'll get more acceptance because they realize that you have a thought process behind what you're doing. Next question I have coming in offline, and that is, how do I go about changing the culture of a team to think in terms of risk to the business in a busy factory workplace? When you want to make your team aware of the larger issues, what you want to do is you want to create the ties between their daily behavior and those large-term risks. So it might be a situation where if you're in a busy factory workplace, it isn't just a, how many days since last accident thing that you have up near the break room. It might be, we do this particular behavior because if this happens once, it costs the company $25,000. So if we have one accident, it's going to increase the insurance. It's going to be the medical bills for the particular worker. It is going to be the lost dollars as far as time is concerned. And so you hit them with some facts and figures, but you bring it down to what is their behavior. And so when you talk about safety in particular, what you do is you actually balance that. So you say, yes, I get it. It's going to take you, if you don't put on a safety harness, it's going to take you an extra, or it's going to save you 30 seconds every time you go up here. That 30 seconds equates to 5 minutes over the course of a day, which is, 25 minutes over a week, blah, blah, blah. You extend it out to like a year. So that costs the company, every 30 seconds, that costs the company such and such dollars. But if we have one workplace accident over the course of 5 years, that more than covers that savings. And so you talk to them in those simple black and white figures. And again, what happens is ties back to the other discussion that we had. What happens is they start building that understanding and building that trust that there is a reason for what it is that you're doing. But when we talk about getting people to change their culture around, that sort of thing, what I want you to do is I want you, from a cultural aspect, I want you to start with something small and obvious. It could be safety. That could be, as far as risk to the business is concerned, that might be it. So take the most obvious safety violation. All right. I've worked in warehouses before where we've got stuff stacked up 20 feet in the air. And I've got people that are not using the ladder, not using the forklift cage, but that are climbing up to grab stuff out of boxes in the warehouse. That is an obvious thing. All right. It might not be small enough. Maybe you have something that's even smaller that you can do. But talk small, talk obvious, and then build into something bigger and something less obvious, and then you start turning that culture around. Okay. So when you want to turn around a culture, when you want to turn around these big things, start small, start obvious, and then build from there. That can be helpful. Next question is, I want to ask about people who don't know what professionalism is. How to deal with unprofessionalism. Great question. Part of it is calling it out. And so I hate to throw the label on there, but I'll go ahead and put it. We hear about this all the time with millennials, that they don't know how to work in the workplace, that they don't understand professionalism in the workplace. Part of it is because they simply weren't taught. So whether they should have learned this a long time ago or whether you're the person that steps in and actually teaches them, this becomes your role. So explain to them why it's important that they do something a certain way, why it's important that they, dress code, the classic one. Why is it important that they look professional in the workplace? What is the reason for that? Give them the reasons why, but call out these behaviors. So much of it is when you see it in peers, when you see it in other subordinates, part of it is because nobody's ever told them. And so because of that, they aren't aware. If you want to see something changed, call it out, and that's going to help get these things changed around. All right, so if you want somebody to be more professional, then when they do something unprofessional, call it out and say, hey, just so you know, I'm sure this isn't how you intended it to be, but this is how it might come across if, you're giving people, bro hugs or something like that when you meet them in a meeting environment or something like that. But give them the issue and give them the reason why that might have been taken a different way. That's a great way of handling unprofessionalism. Got one last question I received offline. So if you have any questions online, drop down into the comments section. I'm happy to tackle those for you. This question comes in. I would like to discuss about one of my HR who, instead of bridging gaps and de-escalating situations, usually tends to highlight and escalate a situation to super bosses. He is not solution-centric. I would need your help on how to handle this kind of HR. Really great question. And I've been in many organizations where tragically HR is not something that de-escalates. Too many times, and I'm sorry if I've got HR people out there, but too many times HR people are kind of justifying their jobs. And this is why you might see somebody escalate something to super bosses right away, even if it's a small thing, because they're justifying their reason for existing. And it's because they're often a very important part of the business that's back in the shadows that nobody sees. And so there's always that worry that if there's a downturn in the business, they'll just cut HR. And in fact, many companies do in those cases cut HR. So they want to kind of magnify these things as opposed to de-escalating them. The way you handle an HR department that's like that, or that is more employee-centric as opposed to a balance between employer and employee-centric. I see that a lot of times too, where HR always takes the side of the employee as opposed to management. And in those cases, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you are keeping HR informed of what's going on. So if there is an issue that pops up in the office, just give them a call. Hey, just so you know, if you hear anything about this, this is what happened. This is why it happened, that sort of thing. Oftentimes, it's the first person that gets to the HR department that gets believed a little bit more. So that's a way of handling it. That's a way of bringing them in the loop. A lot of times, HR departments will want to make recommendations after the fact. And if you have an issue where you see that taking place, where there's recommendations being made after the fact, bring them into the loop before the fact. So it may be that you had that situation pop up. Hey, this happened. Just wanted to make you aware. This is why it happened. What do you think I should do? And so what you're doing then is you're bringing them in to the management process, which is kind of what they're asking for after the fact. in many cases. So bring them into the discussion, keep them informed. That's the best way of de-escalating things when it seems that your HR department is actually an escalating factor. Make them aware of things ahead of time, get to them as quickly as possible. That's the way to do that. Any other questions in regards to that, you can always drop down in the comment section, or we can do some follow-ups. I have no problem following up on this. Abita's question is, can you please discuss about when fake leadership drags down employees into risk? Not exactly understanding what you're meaning by that, but it really gets into a whole, fake it until you make it, that philosophy on things. And that works in some areas, but I don't find that it works in leadership in particular. You don't have to be a rah gangbusters, out in front, leader. There's lots of times where great leaders are behind the scenes, are analytical, are shy. You see that in Fortune 500 companies all the time. Some of the best performing companies out there don't have CEOs that are on CNBC or on the cover of Forbes constantly. They're the ones that are behind the scenes. They don't need to do that, but they lead effectively. There's all kinds of ways to lead effectively without trying to fake it. Because what happens is when you fake it, people see that you're being disingenuous. They see that you're trying too hard. And leadership is tough enough without trying to butt up against so many of those things. That's one of the big things to address. That is just being honest. Because when you're fake, they see it. And all of a sudden that trust starts dissipating, and that's where the risk comes in that I think you're talking about it being. All right, so with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and close out this particular episode of Mentor Minutes. I was thrilled to have everybody on here. Again, if you haven't checked out my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Cameron Morrissey. Really creative. Check it out. There's something on there that can help you out. All right, take care, everybody, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.